2030 vision. And this is essentially the guiding principles that many of the big initiatives in Saudi Arabia are driven by. And one of those initiatives is the National Strategy for AI, the National Strategy for Data and AI, essentially. And this is, um, uh, have many focus areas, but in particular, Arabic language technology is a key focus for that strategy. Again, so there are many elements in that vision, the vibrant economy and vibrant society. There's also a focus on sustainability and enabling social responsibility, and we have done some of that when it comes to AI and so on. Now, what is the Saudi Data and AI Authority? So it was established uh, to enable AI adoption and to create a platform for data in Saudi Arabia. So it has three different components: the National Data Management Office, and this is uh, if you think about it, is the policy when it comes to data, personal protection laws, cross-border data sovereignty, and so on and so forth, and also developing guidelines related to AI ethics and so on. And then there's the National Information Center, and this is really the operator when it comes to Sadaya, and this is all the government data that from the national IDs, all information about uh, the population of Saudi Arabia NIC is the custodian of that data and operating it. And then finally, the last component, which is the AI part of the Sadaya, which is the National Center for AI. And so the vision for the National Center for AI is to lead the kingdom's journey toward global leadership in AI adoption. And I want to stress on the adoption part. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are just trying to utilize AI to, for a better economy and better life for the, population of Saudi Arabia. Um, Obviously, there are four strategic pillars: drive the national AI strategy, then drive data and AI research and innovation. And this is a key component where we hope to play a role in me and my team. And then develop AI solutions. It's not enough to build R&D portfolios, but also to make them in the hands of the users of those technology. And the last thing is building AI expertise. This is something very important for us, is the development of the local talent. So how are we going about execution of that strategy? So uh, we are establishing our own applied R&D capabilities. We focus primarily on technologies such as language technology, with a primary focus, as I said, on Arabic. And then the second one is a computer vision. So we have a lot of work on computer vision, and it's one of the things that we hope to excel at. Obviously, we also focus on domains since we are interested in the application as well. So AI for healthcare and well-being is very important. Environmental sustainability, and to the surprise of no one, is energy is also one of those things. Being a part of Saudi Arabia and the region. Establishing centers of excellence at local universities. So we have already done two centers of excellence, one at KAUST, which is a research university in the western part of Saudi Arabia, and KFUPM, which is in the eastern part of Saudi Arabia. And we are located in the center of Saudi Arabia, so we kind of cover all the different geographic locations. The last part is in establishing collaborations with top international academic institutions. We have started with Stanford as number one, that we have established something already with them. We are in the process of discussing with several other universities potential collaborations, and also forging strategic commercial partnerships with local and international companies. So just to name a few of the local companies, Sky is one of our strategic partners. It's one of the PIF companies focused on AI, and there was a short presentation yesterday to talking about Sky. And some of the international companies that we are engaging with is, Philips in healthcare, IBM, Aquavia in healthcare, also Siemens in utilities and energy, and Google Climate Engine on sustainability and environment. As I mentioned, why Arabic is a key uh, R&D priority for us. There are several factors of why is that. Obviously, uh, Saudi Arabia prides itself in serving Muslims who come to the religious sites in Saudi Arabia, two of the holy mosques in Saudi. And Arabic is the language of the religious books of Muslims, so it's of great importance. In fact, the king of Saudi Arabia, call the title that they use is the custodian of the two holy mosques is one of the titles that they're used. As that places the importance of serving the visitors of these places, and so the other one is it's Arabic is being a global language. It's one of the official languages of the UN, and it's spoken in over 22 countries. The Our strategy really is trying to focus on two things, focusing on resource availability. We recognize that there is a lack of resourcing when it comes to Arabic, especially informal communication. So formal communications, I think the QSRI folks have done a great job of doing lots of data in terms of MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, but there is still a lack of informal content, whether it's text or speech or videos and so on. And then the second part is research and development, and this is innovating to solve issues that are face Arabic speakers when they use AI. So as part of the strategy, we have four key initiatives that have been identified as part of this the strategy. So Arabic technologies commercialization. We realize that it's very critical to have a sustainable business model for R&D, because if it is relying on government funding only, it will always be constrained by the ups and downs of budgeting and so on and so forth. So therefore we want to emphasize on the working on technologies that can be of commercial viability. The second one is world-class Arabic technologies. And this is, really our role here is promoting the development of advanced Arabic language models and so on and so forth uh, in collaboration. Again, we are not trying to do things on our own. We are looking to forge partnerships with whoever is interested in advancing the Arabic technology. The Arabic data enrichment and enhancement, again, this is something I already mentioned, so I won't go over it again. But also the fourth one is really creating the ecosystem from the R&D to academic institutions to the startup communities and so on. There's a lot of startup community now growing, getting up on their feet now in the region, and they are thirsty for the kind of technologies that they want to invest in and build and so on and so forth. And we believe that our language technology is one of the key things that they could be successful at. Um, so, this is, many of you work in the field, so I wouldn't spend too much time, but, if you look at language technology landscape, so there's the goal is to make AI communicate to humans seamlessly, in the sense that the human do not need to adjust the way they speak when they are interacting with an AI system. So that's the goal. The goal is it's seamless. You don't worry about it. You don't dumb down your language to be able to be understood by the machine. And that communication could be through speech, could be through writing, it could be through video recording of sign language or gestures. As you can see that I'm moving my hand all the time. In my case, it doesn't mean anything, but in many other cases, it means a lot. So, especially when somebody is primarily speaking through sign language. So, and then you go into the technologies and then the applications, and that's really the link that we're trying to find between them. As I said, in Arabic, it's not unique. I think it's just accentuates more in Arabic. So when you are in formal settings, you tend to, use a certain type of language. For example, if you are an anchor in news, you will speak in a more closer to MSA, what is more common across the countries. But if you go in informal settings and social settings and so on and so forth and formal chat, then you tend to switch dramatically to your dialectal or colloquial language. So it's both, the word choice and the pronunciation, everything changes. And it's a dramatic change between, across intelligibility between different countries, but it's also, you know, between the two languages, if you will. I'm calling them two languages, but really it's the same language, but spoken in different ways. So, just to give you, as I said, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with this, but Arabic is spoken in this region of the world, the Middle East and North Africa, 22 countries, essentially speaking Arabic or variants of Arabic. Although, MSA is considered common across them, if you read a newspaper, for example, it's fairly intelligible across the many countries. But if you're listening to people talking in the streets, in the markets and so on and so forth, it will be much harder to understand each other. So, and that's where the dialectal content comes into play. So when we started, we wanted to focus on Saudi Arabia, and the hope is that we expand beyond Saudi Arabia. So if you take the five different regions in Saudi, northern Hijazi, Najdi, and eastern and southern parts. Although we are calling these five different regions and they have different dialects, as many of you know already, dialect doesn't really stop at about a border. It's a spectrum. And as you are moving throughout different villages and towns and so on and so forth, the language changes gradually, and sometimes you didn't even feel it until you go to a completely different dialect. And this is Saudi Arabia is no different, especially because there is also migration internally, going from the small cities to the big cities and so on, and so there's this mix of dialects and languages. Um, just to the last maybe 20 years or so, there has been a huge investment into building tools for Arabic, and most of those tools were built for MSA. The although that there has been work, especially by Nizar Habash and Mona Diab and others, working on the dialectal aspect of language, uh, the most of the tools that are available are MSA. And Arabic is uniquely challenging because, especially when it comes to speech, because the written version of the text does not necessarily capture all the things that you need to pronounce the word correctly. And it's actually because the short vowels are not written, they are inferred from the context. And so these are some of the examples. And we have the part of speech and the translation. If you look at this word, if you remove the diacritics, it looks exactly the same, but it's pronounced in many different ways, as shown by the transliteration, and the meaning changes. Sometimes it's the same root, sometimes it's actually different root altogether. Traditionally, crafted systems were used, for speech recognition, for example. There was a lot of investment in the past on, the early work focused on optimizing feature selections and, acoustic modeling and so on, optimizing decoding methods. Obviously, this is, that's this field more than I do. But, the language model used at the time are usually trained in a lot of text, but they're not changed or adapted for speech in the sense that while you're training the speech model, they are not really adapted. They are built in text, and they are taken as is for the most part. So today, with the neural deep learning methods, this is becoming more of a possibility right now. So, but the early work on end-to-end systems, again, focused on if you look at some of the models, the early models, listen, attend, spell model, for example, and so on and so forth. It required lots of transcribed data to be trained. And more recently, with the work on pre-trained models, on spoken data without any, without, so that you train these models on lots of spoken data, but not transcribed, and then you use a little bit of transcribed data or a lot, depending on how accurate you want the system. Obviously, Ahmed Abdurrahman yesterday talked about adapting using 10 minutes, and if you look at the performance, you get something decent. However, if you're interested in using something commercial, you need to train it in much larger than the 10 minutes. Now I'm going to talk about some of the experience that we had in developing an ASR for Saudi dialects. And obviously the biggest challenge that we had is there was no data in Saudi dialect, so we had to first collect that data. The experiences in collecting that data, obviously speech data is not easy also to get, in the sense that it's not like you can go and crawl the web and you get lots of data. So, especially dialectal, because people tend to type stuff, but the social media will have some content, but it's mining that content will be much harder to find specific things for dialect, for example. We collected thousands of hours, and we transcribed lots of that data, and we roughly have about 30% of the data was MSA, 70% was Saudi dialectal data, distributed over the multiple regions that we have. So the model is based on wave to vec to large. It's the same architecture. And we have done some multiple experiments in terms of, whether to do training from scratch for the pre-trained model, or to take the existing multilingual model and adapt it to Saudi dialects and so on. I just want to give an example, I know that many of you don't speak Arabic, but I think just to understand and the complexity of this is kind of, I'm issuing this as a challenge to the audience who speak Arabic, so to understand what this person is saying.
أنت من يوم لبست الثياب الجديدة هذه ومدانين مهطلة وأنا غاسل الندي منك. اشتحي العمك قم.
Okay. So I think I understood 2 words from that. But this is after many listening to that audio. This is the transcription of it. Is for those who are, this is taken from a series in Saudi TV. So this is some of the experiments that we have done in dialectal data, as I mentioned. So if you look at the, on the left here, we have the base model, so the cross-lingual model. And then this is continuing the pre-training using some audio-only data, and then fine-tuning it on transcribed data. So if you do that, if you take the original model and just fine-tune it in 50 hours of Saudi dialect, the word error rate, the overall word error rate will be at about 46%. If you look at it on the Saudi portion of the data, obviously is, that's 43. If you take the pre-trained model, the base model, and then fine-tune it with the audio only, with a collection of subsampling of the data that was used to originally build the model itself, and then add to it some MSA and Saudi dialect, and then fine-tune it in 50 hours of transcribed data, the word error rates decrease significantly. And then if you add, but if you don't start from the base model, but take the same architecture, train it on only Saudi data, 2K hours of audio, and then fine-tune it in 50 hours of transcribed data, again the trend continues, and you see a significant drop on both MSA and Saudi. And if you look at the Saudi, where the rate is significantly higher than MSA in this case. So this is the experiments with only 50 hours of transcribed data. If you add significantly more, transcribed data, the numbers continue to drop. So we are at 15% of word error rate in MSA and 24% in dialectal Saudi. Obviously, the data has other dialects. It's not only Saudi dialects, and that's the bucket that we have at so the data was collected from Saudi, concentrated in Saudi content, but there are other speakers there are other speakers of other dialects who speak in those collection. So as part of this is we are calling the system Sautek, which means your voice in Arabic. It's a play on the word. And if you take the system and benchmark it against some of the international APIs that are out there that support Arabic, we come about 8% relative on over the best system. This is if you take it on the side dialectal content. If you take it in MSA, it's also better, about 7%. The the so when we showed this in some of the local events in Saudi, we have seen tremendous appetite for speech recognition for the local content, and some of the biggest providers of call center support, for example, we're very interested in that type of stuff. Obviously, people when they call in the call center, they don't speak in MSA. It's not that no surprise to anyone. So, and this is an example of, the same example, the audio that I played before. If you look at the first sentence here is, this actually, a different segment. I'll play it.
أنت من يوم لبست الثياب الجديدة هذه ومذانين مهطلة وأنا غاسل الندي منك.
In case you haven't noticed, it's actually two people speaking, just as an FYI. And if you take, one of the APIs out there, this is the transcription. The first sentence is the transcription of that system. In reality, the content is much longer, but they dropped a lot of content because it was very hard to recognize what was said in there. So some of the lessons that we learned while building this is when we took TV shows and transcribed them. I originally put here 25% to 30% is wasted because it's not speech, but I listened to Abdurrahman yesterday, so I just said that there's no textual content, it's some other things. So there's some signal in there. I'm not saying that it's not relevant, but it's not relevant when I'm transcribing text. So it's about, so when you are paying for transcription, you usually pay on the input. So, you allocate 25% of your budget to something that you don't use for speech recognition, just as an FYI. It was kind of interesting. So, if you haven't negotiated transcribing data yet and you are in the process of doing one, do it on the output, not the input. The importance of transcribe, when you are dealing with MSA, it's much easier to transcribe data. So, but when you're transcribing, because you can pick any of the educated people and they will be able to transcribe it for the most part. But when you're dealing with that heavily dialectal content, it's very, very important to pick somebody who is familiar with that dialect. Otherwise, all the transcription will not be accurate. As I said, when I play that, some of those, although they're connected from Saudi TV, some of them I wouldn't understand what they were saying if they were asking me to transcribe that. So, and this is for me in Saudi Arabia, who, grew up in Saudi Arabia for a very long time. So, I'm familiar with the, at least the dialect that I was raised in. But it's, especially if you want to go like heavily dialectal content. So it's very important to pick somebody who's familiar with it. So the first process is, the transcribers would listen to the audio and they're asked whether they are familiar with it or not. If they're not familiar, they didn't even bother. They just skip it and, put their best guess of what the dialect is. So the other one is that when you are dealing with, spoken text, spoken language in the region, people tend to code switch. So they'll throw in English words or some other languages in there. And interestingly, they would conjugate them and, apply the morphology and all that. So, it's not, take an English word, apply the Arabic morphology to it, and adapt it as part of the language. So when you're especially when in informal context, you will find a lot of that in there. And the other part is that, especially in the Gulf region, there are many, many expatriates who moved in the region and, speak the local language, but they speak it in their own way. So it's a kind of a different language, if you will. So when you are trying to build speech recognition systems, obviously you have to take that into account, because if somebody picks up the phone, you cannot assume that they are speaking the local dialect only, but an adapted version of it. So they will speak, if it's an Indian person, they will have their own way of speaking. If it's an Egyptian, they will have Egyptian dialect mixed in with trying to speak in the local dialect as well. So all of that thing that needs to be, taking into consideration. So obviously you cannot encode all of that information. The best way to do it is to ensure that your data is representative of the actual content that is being used in the country or the region. As I said, part of our mission is really to enable research and development, not only our own research and development. We are trying to engage the community to work on interesting problems related to Arabic language technology. And as part of that, we are releasing benchmarking data for Arabic language, the first of which will be spoken transcribed data. And this is in collaboration with the Saudi Broadcasting Authority. Again, this is content from Saudi TV. It's been transcribed, and we split it into 3 different splits. The audio recordings were sourced from more than 80 TV shows focused on informal content. So as I said, we try to intentionally avoid broadcast news, because that tends to be an MSA type of thing. The total published hours is about 667 hours. Uh, and the recordings are in Arabic. The majority are in Saudi dialect, but with some other dialects mixed in. They were transcribed manually and annotated with dialect, gender, age, and environment. And we have put this up already on Kaggle, and we're looking into putting it more available more widely. So I put in the link in here. Hopefully, when we put the slides on the website, you will be able to access the link. Sorry, no QR code yet. So this is some of the meta information you will find. You will find the year of the show, and these are the shows that we selected span a very long period of time. I think it's about 40 or 50 years. So some of the early shows and some of the later shows. So if you want to do some interesting work on language changes and so on, there's that content as well. We just annotated the year. We don't do anything else beyond that. And we have also the show name, the speaker gender, the dialect, the timestamps of the audio, what the annotator thinks the age, which is roughly about 4 different categories. The ambience, this is whether it's a noisy environment or a clean environment. And we diarized it with, the speaker diarization within a 10-minute segment. So we split it into 10-minute segments, and then we diarize within, so we mark the speakers within, but we don't do it across segments. So, but the segments is about 10 minutes, so that should be it. So just to show you some of our own experiments on this data, but we would love to encourage you to experiment with it and report issues with it, and help us make it better and bigger. So the more you use it, the more justified, it justifies us investing time and making it more available to you. So this is some of the the early results that we've had using the same model that I mentioned before, but again, trained on this content only. So we have a comparison with, actually evaluating on this data, not training. The training is the same as before. So this is some of the breakdown on the data and when it comes to gender, dialect. As you can see, it's the breakdown is within Saudi. We're just focused on Saudi, but there are some minor things that are non-Saudi. The environment. So if you look at the categories, the majority of the data, whether it has music or noisy or, clean is only a third of that data that. And then the speaker age, and as I mentioned, there are about 4 or 5 categories there. Again, this is, if you look at the the training data and the test data, the distributions and the dev set. So these are the statistics of the different categories of classifying that data. And this is again, it's the test set is more. If you look at the entirety of the data, it tends to be more male than female. But we try to do the representation, a balanced representation in the test sets where it's about 50-50 relatively. So I think that's all I had for you. I just wanted to give you some of this. I would love to have opportunities to collaborate and work on language technology for Arabic, and thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Thank you, Yasser. Questions for Yasser? We have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you so much for great talk. I also would like to know whether some other activities related to speech, like speech translation, not ETS, and so on.
Yeah, so thank you. There are other activities related to speech, yes. We're working also on TTS. Speech translation, I spent so much of my lifetime in translation and speech translation, but that's not something we're working on right now. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Yasser, for the nice presentation. I have short 3 questions. The first one, do you have an online interface such that we can upload audio, whether it's in Saudi dialect or other dialect or even MSA, and we have the transcription? The second question is about the word error rate. You mentioned that on MSA, your model achieved 7%, so 7 points better than the state of the art. I remember that the state of the art was 12% word error rate. This means that you achieved 95% accuracy, like this?
On the first question, so we are working on making it available as a service, and we're working with Sky. Sky will be the one that's making it available. In terms of the other question related to the 7% on MSA, let me just correct you. It's not state of the art. We don't claim that it's over the state of the art. It's over whatever is available as a service. And I'm not naming names, but it's the international companies that have the main players that do speech recognition for Arabic. That's what we're comparing to, the best among those.
The last question is about the punctuation restoration. Do you plan to have them as an output from the ASR?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Punctuation restoration for the Saudi transcription.
Yeah, so we're not really trying to, as I mentioned, one of the main issues in transcribing and writing dialect is there's no standard. And we're not trying to create a standard for Arabic. We don't look at ASR as the application. It's one part of a puzzle to build an application. If you look at my slide, it's really, we look at it as a technology that needs to be embedded with additional things. So for example, a call center will use ASR. They don't need necessarily to transcribe. What they need is to be able to serve the customer. And that's what really the intent for building that. This is a building block. I don't know if I answered your question.
There's one at the back.
I had a question related to that, just about data collection efforts. So it strikes me that for a lot of Arabic dialects, you run into a data problem, especially because there may not be a standard transcription. A lot of transcriptions that you'd find would probably be in MSA, even if the actual spoken dialogue is in dialect. So do you have efforts towards maybe collecting data for certain dialects? Is that kind of part of your research?
For this effort that I mentioned, we did not collect any text data. We collected audio. And the intention is to collect the dialectal data. So we actually also collected from social media and so on and so forth, but most of the things that we're releasing here are part of the Saudi Broadcasting Agency Authority. In text, we have not done anything related to the text collection for this effort. There are plans, obviously, to do that, but as I mentioned, there are people who write in forums and dialectal content and so on, but it's very hard to mine and to find the dialectal parts of it compared to MSA. MSA is much easier to find, obviously. In terms of, as I said, we are not working on standardizing transcription or the orthography of dialectal content. I think there are many others who are much more knowledgeable about this, and they have done an amazing job in trying to do this. If I were to mention one name, Nizar Habesh, I think he has done tremendous work. He's at NYU Abu Dhabi right now, so and he's continuing to work in that space as well.
Any other questions for Yasser?
Thank you very much, Yasser, for a wonderful talk. So I have two quick questions. The first one is about, you said that you yourself couldn't kind of recognize some of the words. So to reflect the complexity quantitatively, have you done some human speech recognition like what your former colleagues were doing on switchboard in IBM? So that's the first question. The second question is about the genre of your ASR. So is it a general purpose ASR or it's kind of tailored for some specific applications like the call center or reading book? In other words, what's the closest kind of English task to it just to make sense of what your ASR is specific or work well for on that scenario?
Yeah, so I heard the second question much better than the first one. So let me answer the second question and then we'll get back to the first question. So in terms of the domain or the application, we didn't really tailor it to call center. I just want to be very clear. So because the content is social media and TV content mostly, we have not done anything related to telephony in this particular work, but we plan to do some of that work as well. The first question, was related to understanding the sentence, but I didn't.
So the human recognition, if you ask people to transcribe and then you have a kind of ground truth transcription by experts.
Yeah.
So how different they are, or what's the performance of the human?
Yeah, so obviously it's a very good question, and they have to go back and forth. We have a QA process that goes through after we receive this. There are multiple people who will listen to the audio, samples of the audio and check the transcription and so on. It's much more expensive to transcribe dialectal content than MSA, I'll tell you that, because of this back and forth in terms of transcription. So, I cannot really put a number on, the accuracy of a human. It really depends on who the human is. If somebody is familiar with the dialect, obviously they will do very well. If somebody who's doing, who's a native speaker of a different dialect, I would say they are much worse than the machine.
Hi, Yasser. Thanks for the nice overview. I'm very happy to see this effort and see someone like you sort of helping with it, partly because this dialect problem, of course, is not just unique to Arabic. There are many other languages which have large populations, like Hindi is an easy example. So this will actually help language technology all over. So I think you're thinking that you want to bring in the research community to look at this and share things back with them is going to be very good. So thank you. It's a note of appreciation. Along those lines, I had a technical question either for you or for your team, which is, how easy or hard is it to do dialect adaptive processing, whether it be for speech or NLP? What I'm thinking is that probably there won't be a one model fits all dialect solution to it. It'll probably end up being more adaptive. I'm also thinking, for example, people probably do the same thing, that when you go to another part of Saudi Arabia, it takes you a few minutes or a few hours, a few days to get used to it, but then you process things differently. So is there, I wasn't paying close attention. Did any of your results have any dialect adaptive solutions, or is that something in the works?
Yeah, right now and I can verify with the team behind you, but right now we just mix in the data and we build from what the data availability. We are doing contrastive experiment as we speak, where we separate the data and we train differently, and then we mix the data in different ways. But just the numbers that I reported are just throwing in the data and measuring differently on dialects.
A quick question along those lines. You mentioned code switching. Is that the same answer for code switching as well?
So on code switching, we are not measuring it because it takes time to annotate the data. So we have not done really extensive analysis on it yet. I think it will be a major obstacle that we need to tackle, deploying these for real.
As part of the DARPA programs, there was a lot of Arabic data that we were all working with. Do you incorporate any of those, or is that a little bit obsolete now?
So the Bayes model has some of that data in it because it's it's pre-trained with some of that data, and we have used some of the the Gale data and so on from the LDC, for example. But in terms of dialectal content, I don't think that there is that much 16K dialectal content for Saudi. They have the Gulf, so they take a different granularity when it comes to dialectal content.
Thank you very much, Yasser, for the nice talk, and congratulations for these achievements. So I have a rather comment than question. So probably the numbers you showed for evaluations would be a little bit kind of very high level and may not tell exactly what's the accuracy if it's broken down to the specific specific the dialect or specific variety. I think probably if that were broken to, and also the genre, because I think the TV shows, they're also not all the same. Some of them are like movies where people are excited and jumping, whatever. There's a lot of music. So those ones here, maybe the system will perform very low versus one, for example, someone who is making a call to a bank. So these kind of modalities and types probably will make a big difference and may incite which data needs to add more or and so forth.
Obviously, there are many, many ways in which you can slice and dice the data and analyze it and so on. And this is one of the reasons why we owe it to the community to release the data and just give the people the chance to do their own analysis and own findings and so on, because there are many different angles you can take to it, and I would encourage the community to experiment with it, report any issues, and anything that we can do to help. We are comments are more than welcome. We will be more than happy to work with anyone. But yeah, I mean, this is just the beginning.
Thanks, Yasser, for the great talk and this great progress. So a comment and question for the comment that Irfan has mentioned earlier. There's a paper presented here by NG. She's working with Nizar, and she did, there's a very interesting study for human acceptability. And that was an interesting way to go over, the solid metric of word error rate, especially for dialect that doesn't have standard orthography. So, the data has been given to human. Do you like the output or no? And it was surprisingly to see the correlation between the human across the machine together. And I'd like to bring it to what Abdurrahman mentioned yesterday when we look at noise and background noise and this kind of paralinguist features. So what's your take on the dialect transcription? Especially, we are heading toward more and more mature, robust AI machines. So will it be a good way to take us to speech understanding rather than keep staying with the word error rate and report numbers, going to the next stage where what is the intention behind this? So what's your take on this in the context of dialectal Arabic? I mean, of course, taking it forward to other dialects where we go around the standard orthography or addressing speech noise, and these sort of things.
Yes, it's a great question. Any metric is really an approximation of what you're trying, to measure. Word error rate is just an approximation of what you think is correct, a way of measuring it, and it's really, very useful when you're comparing the sales system, different settings, and so on, just to help climb on something. It doesn't mean that it's perfect. I mean, even for English and other languages, you have normalizations before you do word error rate. Just simple fact as the numbers. If you have a spelled out number and then the number is written in alphanumeric, guess what? It will be an error unless you normalize one way or the other. It's the same thing for Arabic. We used to do like the Alif Hamza normalization and, Alif Maqsura, yeah, and all these kind of things. It just accentuates more when you go to dialect. It's not a new issue, it's the same issue, but it's more common now. And I agree with you, is the evaluations, I think, the ultimate evaluation is the utility of the system. Whether it is for accessibility, whether it is for call centers, whether it is for some other thing, that's what you need to be measuring, the ultimate goal that you're building the system for. But obviously, as a researcher, it's very hard to embed your system into something bigger and do the evaluations on a regular basis, because you need something to, to drive your research agenda. And I think as long as there's a good correlation with what you're trying to achieve, I think that's a much faster way of, doing your implementation rather than every time doing A/B testing and so on and so forth, because not everyone can afford to do that. I hope I answered your question.
Any other questions for Yasser? If not, Yasser is going to be around. Please feel free to catch him and his team and ask any other questions they may have. Thank you very much, Yasser, for an excellent talk.
Thank you.